Greetings everyone. So, as I'm sure you'll know, there was recently a big ceremony in the Vatican celebrating the canonization of a couple of new saints. And one of those new saints was Carlo Acutis, Saint Carlo Acutis now. And I recall seeing an article about this in the BBC and being somewhat surprised that they even bothered to cover this. Because I thought, why would the BBC care that the Catholic Church has made some new saints? They create saints, they canonize people as saints often. Why do they care about this now, suddenly? Well, maybe it's because he is the first millennial saint, and so that might be of some interest. The fact that he was born in London, perhaps, even though generally he spent most of his life in Italy, may be of interest. But they did write a short article up on this, and I was having a read through it. Of course, it was written from a secular standpoint, always had the word miracles in quotations, but that didn't bother me. What did jump out at me was the fact that they mentioned in the article that some of the people who knew Carlo Acutis didn't find him to be particularly devout. And actually, that was the only time in this article, in that very paragraph, that they mentioned something Carlo Acutis did. They said that he created a website basically cataloguing various miracles. As far as I'm aware, it was actually a website cataloguing Marian apparitions that have been approved and Eucharistic miracles that have been approved. That's all they said that he did. There was nothing else in there at all about anything he did. And there was a mention that some people who knew him didn't think he was particularly devout. So I thought, this doesn't look right. Now, I admit, personally, I haven't known too much about Carlo Acutis. There was this kind of mass craze about him. People would often go to see his relics. They would visit the church he was baptized in, etc. There was a lot of interest in him. I didn't have that much interest in the whole thing. And actually, the only thing I knew about him was that he created this website cataloguing various approved miracles. So I thought to myself, goodness me, let me do some reading, because this can't be all that he's done. And of course, as I got reading, I found that he'd done all kinds of things. He'd been very involved in the church. He'd been a catechist. He'd spoken to a lot of people about the Catholic faith. And he was even the reason that a number of them converted to the Catholic faith. He was the reason his own mother returned to the Catholic faith that she was raised in but didn't really practice much. And he also made this website cataloguing miracles, as well as making a website for a parish. So it's fair to say he was very involved in his faith. Now, one article I stumbled across in The Economist from March of this year was basically a hit piece. Maybe not so much a hit piece against Carlo Acutis, but a hit piece against the Catholic Church, suggesting that they made him a saint illegitimately. It's called The Secret Life of the First Millennial Saint. The Vatican wants him to be the next Mother Teresa, who's also been attacked, by the way, by the media. But what did Carlo Acutis really believe? So in this very long piece that took me about half an hour to read, the writer was basically assigned with finding out as much as he could about Carlo, speaking to as many people he could who knew him, and then putting together some kind of story about this new millennial saint. And in this article, it does mention a couple of his close friends who say they didn't realize he was this devout, pious Catholic, that they had never noticed this about him. And this, I suppose, would have been where the BBC got their information from and put that one line into their article. It also suggests in the Economist article that his mother was pressuring various people who knew Carlo, various friends and teachers, etc., to give positive, glowing reviews of his devoutness and his piety and his love for the Catholic faith. It suggests that she had given a lot of money to the Catholic Church, and this may have been a reason why the Church was so quick to make him a saint, even without any sainthood criteria being met. The writer of the article, who actually spoke to Carlo's mother, was suggesting that the way she was speaking to him was very short and sharp. Now, this is something we can't prove. There's no video footage of this. There's no audio clip where you can hear her voice and the way she's speaking. It's just something the writer has said to make his mother come across as this rather unreasonable woman who has a particular narrative she wants to get across, that her son was a good boy and a saint, and she won't have anyone questioning it. So it was essentially a hit piece, but as I said, it wasn't necessarily a hit piece against Carlo Acutis himself, because it didn't attack the boy and suggest that he did anything bad. It simply suggested that he didn't do anything notable to become a saint, and that the reason he became a saint was somewhat sinister. So it was an attack against the Catholic Church, saying that this is how they make saints. They get given a bunch of money from a family member, and then they propel this person to sainthood. It did get me thinking, why do they keep going after important people in the Catholic Church? Because of course it isn't the first time that the media have gone after saints. They went after John Paul II, for example. They went after Mother Teresa. They like taking down important figures in the Catholic Church. And as I mentioned earlier, in this case, unlike with John Paul II and Mother Teresa, they didn't really attack the person themselves, but they attacked the church. Why does Carlo Acutis matter so much to them? Why do they need to take him down and suggest that he isn't really any kind of saint? Because let's face it, this article where his friends have said, oh, they didn't really notice that he was particularly devout, that doesn't really mean anything. I don't know about you, but when I was in secondary school, I was a Catholic. I went to church. I was very much a believer. I was interested in my faith. I didn't really talk about it ever with my friends from secondary school or high school, because I knew that they were not Catholics. They did not care about the Catholic faith. And, you know, when you're a teenager, you're a little bit shy to talk about these kind of things because it's very much made fun of by a lot of people. So it's no surprise that his friends may not have known that he was very religious, and they may have known him more for enjoying video games or enjoying comedy programs, which is a couple of things they said they would do with him. They did mention, though, for example, that one time there was a discussion on sex before marriage, and Carlo said he was very much against it and that it was wrong. And he was made fun of for it, and then he sort of wanted to change the subject, like he was kind of embarrassed that they were mocking him for his beliefs and didn't want to talk about it anymore. So there were hints there that he was very devout, but perhaps he just didn't necessarily show that devoutness as much to certain people. Maybe he was also someone who wasn't about showing off his faith and talking about it a lot, but more about acting, doing things. It was, for instance, mentioned by someone who knew him that when he was at school and he saw a fellow student sitting there by themselves looking a bit sad, he would go over to them and talk to them, spend time with them, try and make them feel better. So he had many very good, positive, saintly qualities. What does it take to be a saint? Sometimes people have this idea that a saint has to be a martyr, that a saint has to have done some incredible things in their life. They really don't. It just takes being a good person, being good to others, trying to stay in a state of grace as often as possible, following the teachings of your church, going to Mass, going to confession, going to communion, going to Eucharistic adoration, as Carlo's mother said he often did, spending hours there, and generally just being very helpful. You know, creating a website for your parish, helping out your church, being a catechist, talking to people about the Catholic faith, helping them understand it. He did lots of wonderful things. I guess you could say he was kind of a simple saint. There are plenty of things that he did that would absolutely merit a sainthood. And if he was living his life as a young man, trying his best to follow the teachings of the church and follow the footsteps of Christ, then he absolutely deserves to be a saint. And even more so if he was responsible for the conversion of others, i.e. bringing people in to the church, bringing people to God. When he was dying, he offered up his suffering for the Pope and for the church. Thankfully, he didn't have to suffer too long after being diagnosed. I think it was only a few more days before he died. It seems like he was a very decent young man, and there really isn't any issue with him being made a saint. So for those in the mainstream media who are once again trying to take down a decent human being who's lifted up high by the church, you won't succeed. Somebody like Carlo Acutis can be a problem for those who hate the church, because he was a young man, and as a very young man, as a teenager, he brought a lot of young people in. A lot of young people have taken a great interest in him because he was alive in the technological time that we live in now, the time of the internet, and he still managed to live a good and decent life and use technology for good. So a lot of young people have flocked to see his relics and to attend services for him. A lot of young people flock to the Vatican just now. And this is something that the enemies of the church don't really like. They don't like to see it bringing in young people. They keep trying to put forward this narrative that the church is awful, that they're doing terrible things, that they are very backward and archaic, and you shouldn't be a member of the church. Whereas Carlo Acutis is actually turning young heads towards the church. And this might be a very obvious reason as to why they are trying to take him down. Folks, thank you very much for watching the video. Do leave your comments below if you have some thoughts on this, and have yourselves a blessed day.